Hi, I'm Tom Holcomb, and I'm here to welcome you to a special fingerspelling class as taught by Joyce Linden Grude. Fingerspelling is an important component of American Sign Language. Deaf people often incorporate fingerspelling in their sign conversations. I'm from an all-deaf family. I have deaf parents and grandparents. While I was growing up, I saw words spelled in everyday conversations, and so I learned to use fingerspelling naturally, and I see my two deaf children developing the same ability. When my oldest daughter was 3 or 4 years old, she attended preschool. One day she came home and said, "Daddy, I have 3 boyfriends." I asked her to tell me their names. She responded by giving me a name sign for the first one and attempted to fingerspell a name and did the same with the second and third, a name sign followed by gibberish. You see, she knew the role of fingerspelling, that it represents words in American Sign Language, often names of people, but she had no idea how to spell their names or even what the letters were of the alphabet. Those of you who are learning sign language and fingerspelling want to be able to spell clearly and be able to read deaf people when they spell to you. You may feel it's difficult to spell clearly and even harder to read back, but it doesn't have to be that way. Your teacher has many ideas for strategies on how you can improve those skills. She also has some practice hints for you on how you can clarify your fingerspelling and ways to practice reading spelling. This class is straight out of the 21st century, a very futuristic setting. Each student has their own individual computer station and can interact with Joyce, the teacher. Are you ready to start working on both your expressive and receptive fingerspelling skills? Warm up your hands and get your eyes ready. Joyce has many years of experience teaching fingerspelling, so let's meet her now.
Hi everyone. Welcome to Fingerspelling class. My name is Joyce Grude. I know many people experience frustration while learning to fingerspell, and they feel the need to improve their skills. Each of you may be here in this class for different reasons. Some of you may be parents of deaf children, and you're learning to sign and want to improve your fingerspelling. Others of you may be interpreters and perhaps want to improve your skills. Some of you may be sign language students, and you may want to develop your fingerspelling ability. I'm pleased that you've come to this class. We're going to concentrate only on fingerspelling. This class is not going to include any work on numbers, although I believe that reading numbers is very much like reading fingerspelling. It's very frustrating because the hand shapes are quite similar to the hand shapes used in fingerspelling. But numbers will not be covered in this class. The focus is on fingerspelling. I wish I had a magic pill to offer you, and upon swallowing it, you would immediately become an expert fingerspeller and instantly be able to read proficiently. I'm sorry, but such a pill does not exist. Developing skill takes hard work and lots of practice, and the fact that you are here now is the first step. Today, I'm going to share some of my ideas, experiences, and strategies that I've collected over the years that might help you improve your skills in fingerspelling. This class is divided into different sections. We'll take a look at historical changes that have occurred in fingerspelling. You'll learn some strategies that you can use to improve your skills in both receptive and expressive fingerspelling. And you'll also get a look at variations in hand shapes that deaf people use for certain letters of the alphabet. We'll spend some time on loan signs that are part of ASL, and we'll have a little bit of fun by having a look at creative ways of fingerspelling words. My hope is that you'll enjoy your experience in this class. Even though I have deaf parents, I didn't learn to fingerspell until I was 9 years old, because although my parents did sign a little, they were educated orally. At that time, they taught me the signs for things like cat, home, milk, cry, baby, more, horse, cow, and that was the extent of my sign vocabulary. They taught me how to fingerspell in alphabetical order. That's how many people learn, from an encyclopedia, a dictionary, or the Girl Scout or Boy Scout handbook. Just like this card that shows the 26 letters of the alphabet. The problem with this approach is that the learner then tries to match the hand shape with each individual letter. For example, if I want to spell my name, I have to hunt for the J, and then let's see, where's the K, L, O? Here's the O. So students learning this way don't see the word as a whole unit, and instead look at each shape and then look at the hand facing them, not at the back of the hand when they're actually spelling words. As for these cards, in my opinion, they're not an appropriate tool to use for learning the alphabet. No, you can't. Sorry, no one can make money on this one selling it after class. So what I'm advocating is that we need to unlearn incorrect techniques and establish a new attitude or approach toward fingerspelling by looking at words as whole units and not at each individual letter. By not approaching fingerspelling in this manner, we become frustrated and often panic when we try to read a fingerspelled word, and we sometimes end up blocking on it. If we look at a natural family setting, we can see how children of deaf parents learn fingerspelling. Even though they don't actually know the alphabet, from the time they're infants, when their caretakers spell words to them, they are actually seeing words as whole units. At CSUN, California State University, Northridge, a deaf professor, Dr. Larry Fleischer, tells a story about his children. He has a deaf daughter and a hearing son, and when they were quite small, perhaps around age 2, Larry explains that his daughter could read the word refrigerator, even though she didn't know that the letters were R-E-F. She could see the total shape of R-E-F, and she knew that it meant the refrigerator. She saw that as an entire unit and didn't realize what the individual letters were. Larry could also spell go to bed, and she understood the meaning as an entire unit. The alphabet isn't really learned until children enter school and learn English orthography and connect the fingerspelling hand shapes with letters and words in print. This means that we have to change and establish a new habit of reading fingerspelling as whole words based on the shape. The concept of reading words based on shape or configuration is an important idea. There's been very little research on fingerspelling. A deaf woman in San Diego, California, Dr. Carol Padden, has been doing research and has discovered that deaf children go through specific stages, recognizing words as shapes in the beginning. Then, attempting to fingerspell, they omit letters and don't follow the correct patterns of English, maybe are sloppy. And when they finally learn to read and make the connection with English orthography, they then are able to fingerspell English words correctly. Now let's talk for a moment about the sign for fingerspelling. Most of the traditional sign language books show this sign. With body language and facial expression, you can modulate this sign to show a lot of fingerspelling, a long word, or sloppy fingerspelling. But can anyone think of another sign for fingerspelling?
I know two. This one and this one.
Right. This also means fingerspelling, but it doesn't appear in most sign language books. And I think it's used in a different way. This sign has directionality and seems to function more like a verb. I can spell towards you, or you can spell towards me. I can spell to that person over there. I can give you a test by spelling a list of words. The meaning of the sign can vary depending on the idea you want to show. Going back to what I was saying about seeing words as shapes based on configuration, we may not realize it, but we do the same thing with printed words. Children in school do an exercise like this by filling in the blanks with their spelling words for the week. What word fits this shape?
The word apple.
Right. The word apple fits this configuration. I believe many fingerspelled words have very unique shapes. We have to train our eyes to see them. Here's a word that has a lot of shape change. Look at it. And now contrast that with this word, which doesn't have much shape change. Lawyer is easier to read than seat because it has more shape change. Remember, I refer to word shapes as configurations. Hearing people sometimes complain that deaf people spell so fast that they can't see all the shapes, and they keep asking signers to slow down, and then they stare at the hand. Actually, you can read fingerspelling without seeing each individual letter. You have to look at the whole word as a unit. We do this with print naturally without realizing it. We fill in the gaps even though half of the letters are missing. If the bottom two words were in a foreign language that you didn't know, I suspect that it would be much harder for you to figure out what the letters are because you wouldn't recognize the words in that language. Because you know English, you can figure out what the words are. We use our knowledge of English to fill in the gaps. It's just like when we hear words or read something that's not clear or blurred. We do what we call make closure, based on what we know about language, and we can figure out what the words are. Because we're human beings, we're linguistic beings. We have linguistic skills, and we're able to understand the language and fill in anything that's sometimes missing by making closure. Because we know English, we can sometimes anticipate or predict what word might be fingerspelled. We know that English has specific patterns. To illustrate my point, here is a nonsense word. It doesn't mean anything, but it could be English. It could be, right? How do you know that?
It has the right combination of letters.
Right. It follows the rules for English spelling patterns. It has the right combination of vowels and consonants that English uses. Now compare that with this word. Could this word be English? This word couldn't be because it violates the rules. It doesn't have any vowels. Most English words have vowels in them, so you can often anticipate or predict what might be coming in a fingerspelled word. That idea of expectation or anticipation is very much like using what you know of the English language and what you know about the situation or the topic of conversation to provide a context. By taking advantage of the context, oral deaf people follow a conversation through lip reading. But they may get lost when there's a change of subject or if a new topic comes up in the conversation. If you know the topic of conversation and can predict what's coming, you are using the contextual clues and what you know about English to make closure and fill in the gaps, the letters that you don't see because they might be fingerspelled fast and appear to be missing. What I'm suggesting is that you make use of the 3 C words. Here they are. The ability to see shapes or the configuration of words, the ability to make closure based on our knowledge of English to fill in any gaps, knowledge of word order and the situation to make use of context to anticipate what will be fingerspelled. Now I want to discuss the idea of reading words as whole units based on configuration, and the idea of using anticipatory strategies to make closure so that we can improve our receptive skills. Now let me ask you, where are you going to look?
Near the face.
Right, at my face. Actually, research by linguists shows that deaf people really focus here, in this area by the chin, so that they can see facial grammar, body language, any mouth movements, and fingerspelling simultaneously. That doesn't mean that you're going to stare at this part of my throat. I don't want you to look at the hands, though. I want you to see the whole or gestalt of me and the fingerspelling. It's just like driving a car. When you're following a car that's missing a taillight, you don't stare at the taillight. You're watching the road and looking at the whole area in front of you, but you still notice that the taillight is out. You see that while simultaneously looking at the whole picture in front of you. The same thing happens when reading fingerspelling. You're not looking at the hand or at the throat. Now, here's the sentence we're going to use because it contains all 26 letters of the alphabet. It's used by typists to practice typing. I'm going to spell each word in this sentence, starting with the first word. Watch me spell it. Look at the shape. I don't want you to look for individual letters. Think of the whole unit, the, and its shape or configuration. Now the next word, quick. Look at the difference in shape between the 2 words. Now, which word am I spelling? Right, quick has a different shape. Here's the next word. Now tell me which word I'm spelling. Right. Now the next word. Let's see. Tell me which word I'm spelling now. I'll pick one from there. Right. Now try this one. Right. Good. Here's the next one. Look at the whole unit. Now tell me which word I'm spelling. Good. Let's move on to the next word. Now tell me which one I'm spelling. You've already seen the. Let's go on to the next word. Now tell me which word I'm spelling. Right. Try this one. Right. Now for the last word. Let's see. Tell me what this is. Right. Now which one? How about this one? Now, try this. You know that one's easy because of the shape change with the Z in the word. It makes it very easy to read. Good. Now I'd like to show you what the whole sentence looks like in fingerspelling. Many students think that fingerspelling is a little bit like typing, and you show the separation between words just as you do on a typewriter by kind of pushing the carriage over. That really looks silly. See if you can tell how I'm showing the separation between words. Here's the sentence. What indicates that one word has ended and another word has begun?
You stop or pause between words.
Yes, there is a little pause. Now, does that mean we stop and kind of wait between each word? Or do we go back to a neutral position between each word like this? Watch what I'm doing. The last letter stays there. It's held. Not a lot longer, just very briefly. You have to concentrate to see that, and sometimes it's easy to miss. But there is a slight pause as you hold the last letter of each word. You really have to watch closely to spot that pause because it's not very long. It's very brief, probably a fraction of a second, and it's easy to miss sometimes. It does require practice. Now I'd like to offer some guidelines to help you achieve clarity in fingerspelling. To start with, where should we hold our hands? In what direction does the palm face, in or out? Is it all right to fingerspell this way?
The palm faces the person you're talking to.
Right. In conversation with someone, your palm generally faces that person. I want to expand on this idea that I'm going to show you. Understand that deaf people are very good at reading fingerspelling from all angles. Let me give you an example. I can be sitting next to someone having a private conversation and spelling palm facing down. The person next to me doesn't have to get down on the floor to read the hand. You can be in a car and fingerspell out the window, and someone in a car behind you who knows the manual alphabet can read it from behind. Let me demonstrate. I'm going to spell the name of an animal and show you that you can read it from behind. Watch. Right, that was cat. Really, how silly of me for turning around. I could have just faced you and just turned my hand around. You can learn to read fingerspelling from different angles and different distances. It just takes practice. We know that many interpreters and even some deaf people develop repetitive motion injuries to their wrists. Disabilities include overuse syndrome, tendinitis, and carpal tunnel syndrome. This is an issue that we all need to be aware of because of the problems they cause. Interpreters try so hard to spell clearly that they often turn their wrists out and stress that area. I suggest that we learn to relax. If you watch deaf people in natural conversation, you'll see that they tend to be relaxed and hold their hands in a natural but straight line so that the hand and the arm are not bent or stressed. I also think it's helpful if interpreters warm up before they begin signing. Lou Fant, a hearing man who had deaf parents, teaches sign language, wrote some books on sign, and at one time was with the NTD, National Theater of the Deaf. He knew as an actor the importance of warming up before going out on stage. He showed me a very simple warm-up that I think you can use. It's very easy. It's just opening and closing your hands from a C hand shape to an S hand shape or a fist. Keep doing it until your hands are so tired that you can't do it anymore. Keep on doing it. When you reach that point, when you're tired, and for some of you it may be sooner than for others, stop. When you just can't do it anymore, drop your hands and relax. They'll tingle a little bit and they'll warm up. It's a great way to warm up on a cold day, and it seems to be helpful for preventing injury if you warm up before you start signing. Now, where do we keep the arm and the hand? Right, they need to stay in this location. Fingerspelling involves the hand only. It doesn't involve the rest of the arm. For example, with the letter Q, some beginners tend to throw the elbow out. You need to relax and keep your arm still. If you have that problem keeping your arm in position, put something under your elbow and hold it against your body. Just be careful that you don't walk around fingerspelling in an awkward position. Relax. One more idea that I feel is important involves developing some skill in spelling and talking at the same time, using SimCom or simultaneous communication. Interpreters or transliterators use English or English-like signing, what we call PSE, Pigeon Sign English or Contact Variety English. When we SimCom or use more English-like signing, we need to use mouth movements to follow the English words. Is it appropriate to SAYEACHLETTER while YOUSPELL? It's not necessary to say each letter. Deaf people read whole words. The Rochester method that was used in schools for the deaf many years ago required teachers to talk and fingerspell at the same time, and the mouthing and their spelling had to match. Some people are not able to do that easily. They fingerspell ahead of their mouth or behind their mouth. Let me give you an example. California. Phew. Other people might fingerspell it first and then say California afterwards. You have to match the speech with the spelling, and the only way to do it is by slowing down your speech. Now, that doesn't mean that you always have to mouth words while you're fingerspelling, but when you are using more English-like signing, you can move your mouth to match the fingerspelled word. Actually, deaf people do use some natural mouth movements when they fingerspell sometimes. Let me show you some examples. Do you have some examples? Good. Good. Notice the natural facial expressions and mouth movements used with fingerspelling at the same time. Now I'd like to take a look at the words in the whole sentence. I want you to see the variations in how each letter is formed. Deaf people have their own individual hand shape styles. I want you to look at that now and spell with me as we take a look at each word. Okay, do it with me. You'll see some variation, but be sure that you roll from the T to the H. Sometimes you'll see the H this way, sideways, and sometimes pointing forward. Which do you think is better? Look at the difference and see which one is faster and which one's easier to read. Right. Keeping the H straight ahead is faster, but turning the H sideways is easier to read because there's more configuration. If your goal is to be an interpreter, you might wish to aim for speed and make an H with your fingers pointing straight. If you want to work with deaf children, for ease in reading, you might want to make the H sideways. I encourage you to always look at the deaf people in your community as your models and see what style or hand shape variations they use in forming individual letters. Now, we even have a shortcut E. This is a full E, where your fingernails are actually showing. I know that some hearing people and even some deaf people use an open E, but I much prefer a closed E. I think it's much clearer. However, the shortcut E is acceptable after certain letters. Any letter that uses the same two fingers, such as after R, in the word R, or in the word Q after U, you can use the shortcut E. You don't have to use the full E. But when you are using all of the fingers of the hand to make a letter, you cannot use a shortcut E. Let's move on to the next word. Notice the transition from the E of the previous word. Do it with me. Watch your elbow with the cue. What do you do with your thumb when you make an I? You can't leave your thumb out because it will look like a Y. You can bend it in or hide it under your other fingers or put your thumb around your other fingers. I tend to slide my thumb down and keep it bent, but there are other ways of making I. Do you have an example? Right. In some words, you can leave your hand in the shape of the previous letter and then make the I. In the word nice, leave your hand in the N position. Let's look at our models. Then the C and the K. For the K, I want the index finger pointing straight up and the other finger pointing out in front. Good. Okay, the next word. Again, notice the transition from the previous word. Keep the other fingers down when you make the R. Sometimes people confuse O and E. I suggest you have your thumb and index finger meet in a smooth circle, and don't have your thumb too far over or under the other fingers. It's much easier to read an O that way. Now, when I was a child, I learned N this way. And now I make N this way. Why do you think there's a difference? Look at the two ways of spelling brown. Which is easier to read? Right, there's more configuration here. This is a very tight N. There's more shape here, and it's much easier to read. Next, you will see variations in the letter F. You'll see it this way with the fingers separated or together. In spelling fox, drop those fingers to make the O. Just leave the thumb and index finger in the contact position. Don't open it to form the O because it will look like you're spelling F-C-O. Leave the F there and go directly to the O and then to the X. It doesn't matter where you put your thumb for the X, outside your fingers or underneath. You will see different F hand shapes. You'll see it made this way, where the index finger is folded over the thumb, or the thumb is even on the outside. Notice the word cafe. Leave your hand in the A hand shape and then go directly to the F, so that the thumb is still on the outside. Here's another shape. The F looks like a snail from the S in San Francisco. So you can see that it depends on the letters preceding or following each letter. That's assimilation, when the letters next to each other influence each other. All languages undergo historical changes due to assimilation of sounds or letters. If we look at the old films that were made by the National Association of the Deaf back in 1913, you'll see some of those historical changes. We seem to be in a bigger hurry now and want to save energy and time. Let's go on to the next word. A right-handed J is made this way, as though you're tracing the J in the air. And if you're left-handed, what will it look like? Who's left-handed here? Right. Again, it's just as though you're tracing it in the air. And you'll also see J without the wrist twisting, where it looks like an I that's traced in the air in a J movement. Now for the word jumped, we have an M, and just like the N, it's easier to read if the M's this way. Now the letter P, when I was a little girl, I was taught that a P is an upside-down K. What I really prefer is to drop the thumb under the middle finger and to tip it slightly. I think that's a little easier for making double letters. Let's take a look again at the word apple. If you make the P simply an upside-down K, then when you spell apple, you have to kind of bounce the letter P for the double letter. You can use the other shape for P, and then all you have to do is repeat that contact point. You'll see both. Does anyone know of any other variations in the letter P?
In Minnesota, they make a P this way, and places and people and policy with the same hand shape. Jumped would look like this.
Yes, that's right. Some people in Minnesota, for example, tend to make the letter P this way. There are some very well-known people whose personal style includes that form of P. You'll see Mel Carter and Lou Fant make them that way. Let's see the models doing them both ways. You will see variations. Now for the E. Remember, we need a full E. Then for the letter D, it doesn't matter whether you have your fingers in your palm or whether you have all your fingers in a circle. However, I don't like a flattened D with all of the fingers flat because it looks like that Minnesota P. Okay, spell with me. A word of warning. Many beginners have problems and confuse D's and F's. I sometimes see middle fingers in class because students become confused. D uses the index finger. And F is like a feather, or perhaps like a French chef who's using a natural gesture to say everything's okay. If you're confused, remember that the index finger should be used for the D, and the natural gesture is used for the F. If you're uncertain, be careful when you spell the word duck.
Oh.
Okay, now we're at the next word. Notice the transition. Since the V only uses 2 fingers, we can use the shortcut E. Good. Okay, we've already had the word the, so let's go on to the next word. Watch the transition. I don't want your fingers up high in the L because there's much more shape if you relax your fingers and put them in your palm so that your fingernails are showing. That gives you more configuration and it's easier to read. It's also easier to read if you leave those fingers there and drop your index finger to make the letter A and have all your nails showing. I don't want a tight A. I want a relaxed A. Now for the Z, just like the J, we trace it in the air. And if you're right-handed, it looks like this. If you're left-handed, show us. Right, there are 3 motions. Sometimes people add an extra motion or a little hook on the Z, making 4 motions. Z has only 3 movements. You can vary the size from large to small, but the movements are the same. 3 movements. Make sure you hide your thumb when you trace the Z in the air. Okay, now spell that word with me. Right. The secret to making a clear Y is to relax your fingers so that your thumb and little finger will separate more. If you keep your fingers in your palm, you'll have a very tight Y. Do it with me again. And the last word. You'll notice that there are 2 different ways to make the G. When I was a little girl, I was taught that the G should be flat. You could put something on top of it. The G could also face sideways. Now, which is faster? It's really faster facing forward, but turning the G to the side so it's flat takes up more time, but it's easier to read. Sometimes you'll see the G going across your body. You'll see many variations among signers. I have even another variation when I spell my name. Watch me spell my name, Joyce Grood. What did I do with my last name? Right, it looks like a lazy L. It's a G turned over on its side. You will see different G hand shapes used by deaf people. Now the S, the last letter in this sentence. Now I'd like to go through some other guidelines that I think will help you. We've already discussed the pauses that occur between words. Now, what do you do when you're aware of making a spelling mistake? How do you handle errors?
If I misspell hamburger, I can sign that I made a mistake and spell it again.
Right. It's natural to just indicate that you've made an error. Sometimes beginners apologize and erase the error. Isn't that silly? There's a natural way to indicate that you've made a mistake and then to go on or respell the word. I've even seen deaf people use this sign to show that they've made an error. Now, how do you show initials? Joyce L. Grude. There's a slight movement for the initials. Let's look at our models. A left-handed signer here. Thomas H. Gallaudet. Sometimes the movement is circular and sometimes it's just holding the letter a little longer when you make an initial. For example, with acronyms like the NAD, AAAD, CSUN, the letters move a little bit, perhaps not in a circle actually, but they maybe stay in the air a little longer. There are variations. It depends on the letter. My middle initial looks like this. Now for articles. If you're spelling in English, you need to know that the a or an are not attached to words. Suppose this morning for breakfast I had a banana. If I were spelling that for some reason, it would look like one word, a banana. We need to hold the a or move it slightly to separate the a from the word banana. The same thing with an orange. It looks like one word. We have to separate it by holding the N a little bit longer or moving it. A left-handed signer would do it this way. Now for possessives. How does ASL show possessives? Yes, with the palm. We can use that possessive sign with a fingerspelled word. For example, my mother's birthday, Jane's book, Tom's shoes. In English, we show possessives with an apostrophe S, and you'll see this sometimes in ASL, the twisted S sign, and that can get attached to a sign, such as my mother's birthday, Jane's book, Tom's shoes. You'll even see sometimes that the possessive S or the twisted S is attached to a narrative. For example, I could describe the neighbor who lives next to me. You know, the tall, thin, bald-headed man, and then use that sign to say his wife is ill. So I'm using the possessive S after I've described the man next door. And now the last item on our list. We need to discuss double letters because there is so much variation in the deaf community. And you need to look in your area to see what the deaf people do with double letters. Here we see an old film made by the National Association of the Deaf that shows platform fingerspelling with the hand moving away from the body. Watch George Vedet's spell a name and a phrase. Did you see how his hand moves away from the body, fingerspelling out? In informal conversation, I think we save time and energy by keeping our hand near our body. Because in today's world, we seem to work for speed. So there seems to be basically two different ways for making double letters. I'll show you how I tend to do it, and I'll show you other ways. One example is the word doll or ball. You can see that the L moves, or there's a slide. We would put the L on that side and call that a repeated movement, a slide, or maybe a hold. Another example of a double letter would be the double S in the word sassy. The S is repeated by opening and closing it, and I call that a repeated contact, and I've labeled the other column. Now, let's analyze the alphabet and decide in which column the double letters might go. For A, I use the word Aaron as an example. I tend to repeat the A, but you will see some people that hold the A a little bit longer. Mine is a repeated, so where will we put it? Right, in the left-hand column. Now, B, Bobby. I've seen some people move the thumb twice for a repeated B, but that hurts my wrist. I prefer to simply hold the B slightly. Where will we put that? That's correct, on the right side. Good. Now, C, the word success. What am I doing? Yes, good. Now for D, the word daddy. I repeat the D by repeating the contact, but some people, you'll see, will simply hold it. And now E, the word beef or seed. Sometimes you'll see the E held a little bit longer, but I tend to repeat the E. Now for F, as in the word fluffy. I tend to repeat the F. However, you will sometimes see the F being held a little longer. The word coffee is an example. And the word office. You'll see that the F stays in the air a little bit longer, but I'm going to put the F in the left-hand column. Now, for double G, the word egg. Right, the G goes over there. We have no double H's in English. We have the sign hard of hearing. For I, we do have a double I in the word skiing. Right, the I will go over there. Now, English has no double J, maybe the name sign, JJ. K, it's odd, but I repeat and move the K when there's a double K. For example, in the word bookkeeper, we need a middle column, but since we don't have it, we'll have to put K in both columns. For L, we have words like doll and ball. There is a slight movement or a slide. M, as in the word mommy. Where do you think it should go? Right. N, bunny. Right. The same column. O, as in cook, or my last name, Grood. We do have a loan sign, cool, that looks like this, but most of the time I tend to repeat the O, so we'll put it in that column. For the letter P, you'll see both a repeated contact and a bouncing. Remember the word apple? It depends on the word, but I tend to repeat the contact even though both are correct. We should put them in both columns. We don't have double Q's in English. Perhaps we might sign 2 Q's as a symbol for asking a question during a TTY conversation. Double R as in the word berry. We see sometimes people trying to cross their fingers twice. That's really difficult to do. In fact, it hurts my wrist. I think it's preferable to just repeat the R by holding or sliding it. Right, it goes in the movement column. I'd like to tell you about Dr. Simon Carmel, who is a deaf teacher at the National Technical Institute for the Deaf in Rochester, New York. He has a PhD in anthropology and has collected folklore about sign language. He showed me another way of making a double R. I can't quite do it, but he's very good at making both R's simultaneously on one hand. For double S, bossy. Bossy, that's me sometimes. See how I'm making the double S? It goes over here. Double T's, we have the word butter. I tend to repeat the T, so we'll put it over here. Now for U, as in the word vacuum, the U stays up a little longer or slides, so we'll put it over there. For V, we have savvy. Right, it goes in the movement repeated column. English does not have 2 W's unless we're talking about losing weight by following Weight Watchers. Or if we talk about World War II, we would repeat the W by sliding it or moving it slightly. Now for X, the only word I can think of with double X's, because we don't usually have it in English, is the word Exxon, as in the gas station. Exxon. Dr. Carmel showed me a double X also done at the same time with both fingers, which I think is quite humorous. There are no double Y's in English. And now we come to Z. The Z historically should be drawn in the air and repeated twice, such as in the word pizza. But in our effort to save time and energy, we see a historical change taking place. Why make 2 Z's with 1 finger when you can make both at the same time with 2 fingers? So now we're beginning to see pizza as a loan sign. Through assimilation, the word pizza has become shortened to the double ZA and even double Z's. We'll talk more about loan signs later on. Now let's take a look at our columns up here. If we look at how the letters are made, we'll see the influence of the physiology of our hands. For instance, we repeat the contact when there is a place to repeat the contact, but there's no place in a C. We'd have to do it this way to repeat the contact. And we can't do that because there's no place where the thumb touches the hand. So it really depends on the hand shape, and there is a physiological reason how we make double letters. I think it explains some of the historical changes that we see and the hand shape variations that exist within the deaf community. As I said before, I don't like to use ABC cards, but I realize that students often need something that they can take home with them to review the alphabet letters. So I like this chart because this shows you the hands as you're looking at the back of your hand while you're spelling. And it also shows the hands of the person who's spelling to you, so you can look at the hands directly. You'll be able to take this sheet home so you can study it further. Now we've come to a time when we can focus on strategies for expressive fingerspelling practice. We want to work for clarity. Very often people are in a hurry to fingerspell and their fingerspelling becomes sloppy. We want spelling to be clear and accurate. Don't ever sacrifice accuracy and clarity for speed. I'd like to propose the idea of using a metronome for expressive spelling practice. A metronome is used in music for establishing the beat or the time for the rhythm. It's not a natural rhythm for fingerspelling, but I think it's something that will improve your skill if it's used on a short-term basis for practice purposes. I'd like for you to practice now, and I'm going to set the metronome at 100 beats per minute, which is about 20 words per minute. Don't try to spell fast. You might be too sloppy. We're going to start slow and then increase the speed. I'll set the metronome for 100. You can follow the flashing light at your computer station and fingerspell your name along with this beat of 100 beats per minute. Here's my name, Joyce, spelled to that beat. Good. Now let's increase the speed. Good. Spell your name. Here's mine, Joyce. Now let's go a bit faster. Don't bounce. I know it's hard because of the beat, but keep your arm still as you spell your name. Good. Now let's go faster. Good. Now let's increase again. It may be difficult for some of you newer students, so try a shorter word like cat instead of your name if you have a long name. Or you can try it with your non-dominant hand. Do both hands at the same time. Try that. Your dominant hand helps your non-dominant hand so that you can spell with both simultaneously. I was just asked about the best or optimal spelling speed. We have no research on fingerspelling or on what rate deaf people spell in signed conversation. Perhaps some of you will be inspired to conduct further research on fingerspelling and find the rate that deaf people use or prefer in different settings. Let's look at a higher speed now. This is the maximum speed on the metronome. Deaf people may spell at 250 or 300 letters per minute. That equals about 40 words per minute for 200, and at 300 letters per minute, that would be 60 words a minute. Deaf people do spell fast in conversation, especially with loan signs. If your goal is to be an interpreter, you may want to aim for over 200 letters per minute. That's about 40 words a minute, and so you need to practice. Now it's time for receptive practice. There are different ways to practice receptive skills. Remember, we talked about the importance of using the context to anticipate the words being spelled? By being able to anticipate or predict the words that are coming, we can read fingerspelling better. By limiting our category to a small number of words, we increase our chances of guessing right. This can help us to see configurations that we expect to see. For example, colors of the rainbow make up a very small set of words. I'm going to fingerspell names of colors from the rainbow, although not in order. Right. Right. Short words are sometimes easy to read. The word yellow has a lot of shape change. Here's another one. Right, good. Good. A restricted set can include any category that has specific limits. Let's enlarge the set. For example, I could spell the name of a state. Since there are 50 states, you have a 1 in 50 chance of guessing right. Part of what helps us read fingerspelling is a feeling of self-confidence and a belief that we can read it, instead of the frustration that makes us block on reading words. Here's a smaller but expanded list of words, a list of jelly bean flavors. Let's try practicing these flavors. Pick one at random and practice spelling with your partner and have that person spell the name of the flavor that you picked back to you to make sure they got it right. Restricted sets are made up of a limited number of choices. If we go to larger categories, we have to work a little bit harder. Let's expand the list to categories of animals. I want you to use the idea of configuration, your knowledge of farm animals for the context, and that will help you then make closure because you can anticipate what farm animal names might be spelled. Good. Some hearing people often depend on sound when they read. You might want to practice that idea too by looking at the sounds of these blends. CH or ch and the SH sound, sh. With CH now, watch this word. Good. Now watch for this sound. We're still on farm animals. Now let's leave the farm and go to the zoo so we can practice different animals. Right. Right. That's an easy one because of the Z in that word. Try another category now. Did you notice the CH combination on the word Chevrolet? The CH in spoken English is normally pronounced ch, but in that word it's pronounced sh like an SH, Chevrolet. Remember we talked earlier about English having very specific consonant-vowel combinations or patterns? Here are some different patterns from English. I'm going to pick one of these patterns and build words around that particular pattern. First, I'll put a letter in front of at to make short words. Ready? Good. Good. Now I'm going to add an E on the end of at to make it 8. Now we're going to take the E off and put two letters in front. Good. Now we're going to put two letters in front and keep the E. Try this phrase. Good. Now we'll take the E off and replace it with an H so that we have ath. A-T-H. We'll put one letter in front. Good. That's a word used in religious settings. Now we'll add a Y on the end. Then you have the name, Kathy. Now we'll put an ER on the end. Now we'll put an E in front of that pattern. Good. Good. There are many, many different patterns in English. You can make your own list and practice spelling. If you have problems with particular letter combinations, include them in your list of words. Be sure that you put that combination in the beginning, middle, and the end of the words, and practice with a friend or a family member, spelling back and forth so that you focus on the problem letter combinations. Over the years that I've taught fingerspelling, I've noticed that those students who come from a family who valued word games, such as Scrabble, or they may have worked crossword puzzles. Notice the double Z in the word puzzles. Those students seem better able to pick up the skill of reading fingerspelling more quickly than others. Perhaps this is because they've developed the habit of looking at patterns of words and making closure. Now, I promised you a discussion of loan signs. Remember? Many people complain that they can't read because words are spelled so fast and letters appear to be omitted. Actually, I suspect that those people are seeing or not seeing loan signs. Historical change occurs in all languages. Whenever two languages exist side by side, like American Sign Language and English, there is a tendency for one language to borrow from the other, and the same thing happens in spoken languages. English has many words borrowed from other languages, from French and German and so forth. In California, where I live, we have borrowed many words from Spanish. Frequently, streets and towns have been given Spanish names. Today, this class is meeting in San Diego. That's a Spanish name. Dr. Robin Battison, a hearing man who has a Ph.D. in linguistics, conducted research on American Sign Language for his dissertation. He looked at English words that were borrowed and became part of ASL in the form of a standard sign. In fact, he published a book on it based on his dissertation, Lexical Borrowing in American Sign Language. In doing his research, he traced the sign for no good. Let's see what signs you know for that.
There are two different ways for signing no good.
Yes, we have different signs for that. Dr. Battison found that there are variations in how deaf people sign no good. And he asked them why they signed it that way. He got different responses. Some people said, if something's no good, you throw it away, and so the sign looks as if you're throwing something away. He continued to research this and found that originally the sign was based on the English NG for no good. And due to assimilation and historical change, the N kind of became a T, TG, and then eventually the thumb stayed out and it looked like you're throwing something away. So it's not only due to the influence of English, but also the assimilation of the hand shapes of the letters. The words are not simply spelled in English because they actually take on the form of American Sign Language. This happens in other countries too with their sign systems. For example, in Quebec, French-speaking Canada, deaf people have their own sign language, Langue de Signes Québécois, LSQ. The French word that is the equivalent to our English word for if is si, S-I. In English, our loan sign looks like this. In French-speaking Quebec, si looks like this. Another French word, their word for pizza, which is pizzi, P-I-Z-Z-I. This is the loan sign. They don't use the double Z for their loan sign. Their loan sign became assimilated with the letter P in the shape of a Z. Our loan sign for no good based on NG is interesting in other English-speaking countries that use the two-handed alphabet systems, such as Great Britain and Australia. The letter N on the palm of the hand and the G, made this way, has become their sign for no good, the equivalent to our NG. So each country has their own loan signs that are based on their spoken or written language. Dr. Battison also noticed an odd-looking sign that looks like the number 8. Do you know what that means? It means bread. He interviewed deaf people and tried to find out where that sign came from. He discovered different state residential schools for the deaf, such as California, used the Rochester method back in the 50s and 60s, requiring students to fingerspell and talk at the same time. At all meal times, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, students were required to do this. So that meant in the dining room, sitting around the table, asking for milk or whatever, please pass the bread, would become just bread, fingerspelled. And then that became assimilated to BD and eventually to what looks like the number 8. I'd like to show you some deaf models now demonstrating some loan signs. Look at this word and notice how the J twists. English spelling would require J-O-B with the palm out. But in ASL, because we're using our hand muscles, there's a natural tendency to save energy by staying in the twisted position. The loan sign for no has directionality and functions often like a verb in ASL. I can say no to you, or no can be signed to me. No is signed in different directions. Other words that have directionality and function like verbs are shown here. Suppose I loan you a book, and when you're finished, you give it back to me, and then I return it back to the library. The way you sign back shows the direction that the object is moving. We've already had if. We don't spell the individual letters. Here's another one that has different meanings, depending on how it's modulated with accompanying facial grammar. It comes from the English word do, D-O. What am I supposed to do? What are you doing? If I have many things to do and I'm very busy, I can sign it a different way. Words that have the letter U in them often become loan signs. Here are some examples. Some loan signs come from words that have CK combinations in them. Here are some of those. We had back already. Now this one. Some loan signs have very specific movements. Here's one. Here's another one with a specific movement. Some words with double letters become loan signs also. I can talk to all of you, or I can show you a list of words, or use all this way. Cool and will also have particular movements. Some question words are borrowed from English. For example, we have two different loan signs for what. We can spell out the word what, or use the T in an abbreviated form when it's used as a question word. The sign who originated from the fingerspelled word, and then it became assimilated to the sign who at the mouth. Other English words that have become loan signs are the months of the year. There's a particular movement and spelling for each of the 12 months. Right. Many states are based on old abbreviations, not the current two-letter postal abbreviations. Sometimes we use loan signs for titles, common abbreviations, and short words.
apartment.
Remember when we were practicing the category of automobiles? We have loan signs for the names of some cars. Remember I spelled Chevrolet? We have a loan sign. Hearing people don't use the same word. They refer to Chevrolets as Chevys. But American Sign Language uses Chev, C-H-E-V, as a loan sign.
Volkswagen. Plymouth.
Loan signs will continue to grow within ASL as we continue to borrow spellings from English. Many acronyms are spelled as loan signs. Organizations such as these are represented by loan signs. You also need to be aware that deaf people do not always pronounce the words the same way that they are pronounced in English, or even the way they are spelled. For example, PH is normally pronounced as an F sound. However, in the acronym PhD, deaf people don't always say PhD. Right, they use the F pronunciation for the PH. Students learning ASL often are frustrated with fingerspelling. We struggle and struggle in an effort to become fluent and good at reading. Fingerspelling need not be all drudgery. We can have some fun with fingerspelling too in creative ways. I remember seeing this done by the National Theater of the Deaf. Spelling a word as though one hand was in front of a mirror. Dorothy Miles, an actress formerly with the National Theater of the Deaf, demonstrated this fingerspelled word playing with the shape of an object. Here's an L for the shade, the A for the base, M for the bottom, and pull the letter P to turn on the light. Another deaf actress with the National Theater of the Deaf at one time, Audrey Norton, demonstrated this one, spelling in a way that defines the word. Here's a creatively fingerspelled word that demonstrates the actual activity. I remember attending a convention a number of years ago where Bernard Bragg, formerly with NTD and now at Gallaudet, creatively fingerspelled a word that told a story. Here's one that incorporates a sign into the fingerspelling that relates to the meaning of the word. It ends with the sign for two people getting into bed together. Remember several years ago the very popular movie Jaws? I had a hearing student at one time who was very involved in music. She played an instrument, and she came up with this one. Another student created this one that's also based on the meaning of the word, itch. Another student invented this one for a favorite toy. Remember earlier I talked about the fact that you could read fingerspelling from the back of the hand? Well, try this. You don't have to stand on your head to read it. You can read it even though it's upside down. Well, we've spent a lot of time discussing and analyzing the components of fingerspelling. Now it's time to put fingerspelling into a natural context embedded within a signed conversation. We'll watch people talking about their life experiences, where they were born, spelling names of places, or using loan signs. We won't have any voiceover, and there won't be any captions. Practice this as if it's a test, and then we'll go over it again and talk about what was said. Okay? Good luck.
Wow. Joyce certainly has some wonderful ideas on how you can improve your expressive fingerspelling and your receptive skills. It takes a lot of practice. You can practice by reviewing this video over and over again, or perhaps, if you feel that you need more attention on receptive practice, you can simply watch that segment. If you feel you need more practice on expressive fingerspelling, select that segment to watch, or watch the entire tape again. You have a work booklet that accompanies this videotape, and it has more suggestions and ideas for fingerspelling practice. There's also a fingerspelling chart that will help you review the alphabet. The best way, however, is to interact with deaf people in your community and see how they use fingerspelling naturally. That way, you can become a better fingerspeller. Good luck. This videotape is the first of a series. Watch for more to come.